Danny Segura for MMAJunkie.com here in our New York City studios. Today we're chatting with a very special guest. He is the leader, El Jefe of AKA in San Jose, California. He's responsible for getting many champions in the UFC. Of course, I am talking about Javier Mendez, who joins us via Skype to talk about various topics. Javier, how are you? Thank you for joining us.
Oh, I'm good. Thank you for having me on. Almost didn't make it. I forgot it was Skype. Thank God I'm just right across the street.
Well, the most important thing is that you're here. We're doing this, so let's get started. But before, I have some pressing things I want to ask you before we get into the fight talk. You are like basically like the Dos Equis man of MMA. You have like one of the most interesting Instagrams I've seen. Always traveling to exotic places, hanging out and training the most dangerous fighters today. Your Instagram is pretty awesome. Have other people told you the same thing?
You know, a lot of the UFC staff tell me that they love my Instagram because I come up with some funny stuff and I hate to say it, but I become like a little proud of that, and I wait for those moments. And if I catch them, I'm like, camera ready, here I go. Like yesterday, I caught one. I didn't catch it right, where I kind of got into it with one of my coaches, because
I saw that. Yeah,
I was in the wrong, but I caught it. I before I realized that Daniel, being Daniel, first time him and I've been in the same time in training, because we've been missing each other. I've either been gone or he hasn't been training because he's gone. But we were together, and then it's just how he starts stuff all the time, and he's just such an instigator, man. So, anyways, I just decided to film the tail end of that, and that's what gets really fun is when people like him or when him and Khabib go at it.
Yeah, it's the best. Yeah,
and gold, and I just happen to be smart enough to catch it on camera, and then I get their permission before I post. I don't post for that without their permission because I don't want them to get mad at me. And it wouldn't be right anyway.
And that's a difficult thing to do. And you always have like these really cool moments between Khabib and Cormier and other fighters as well. And last thing on this, before we move on into some serious topics, you know how like in Instagram you get all these models like taking pictures of their latte with like nice designs. I saw the most badass video on your Instagram pouring dark black coffee into a metal cup and then just pouring your milk straight from the uterus. That was like the best video I've seen, I think, in 2019 so far.
Khabib sent me that, and I said, "Hey, can I post this?" Go sure.
Oh, that was Khabib drinking his coffee?
I don't know who was drinking the coffee. I wouldn't doubt if it's Khabib. Wouldn't doubt it at all. I mean, that's the way he lives. I mean, he is who he is. He's not this. He's a rags to riches type guy, but he's still in the rags. If you can understand the meaning.
Yeah, for sure. All right, well, let's talk about Khabib. He's got a pretty important fight coming up, obviously defending his title against Tony Ferguson on April 18th here in New York City, or in Brooklyn, should I say, so just over the river. This fight has been booked 4 times before, so this is the 5th time. Are you kind of like, okay, finally it's getting booked, or you're like, okay, here we go again, because it's crazy that this fight hasn't come to fruition. I mean, it's been years in the making.
Yeah, it's been years in the making, and you know what? It's just, I don't know, things are meant to be the way they're meant to be, and they didn't happen, but now it's bigger than it's ever been. So maybe it was meant to be that they were going to fight in a much bigger platform, and here we are. It's the biggest platform that they both fighting each other with what it meant. This is the biggest platform ever for both of them to fight each other, and maybe it was meant to be this way. Maybe it was meant to be bigger than what it was back then, and now we are at the huge platform for both of them, so I just rather look on the positive end of it, no, it's like, hey, God prevents us or helps us, and who knows what he's going to do for us or what he's not going to do. Just know that the platform's bigger now than it's ever been.
Yeah, and I know there was a lot of negative things that led to the fight getting postponed, obviously injuries and other things as well. But are you almost glad that it kind of worked out this way? Because as you mentioned, this is a huge fight now. And I mean, whoever wins, I mean, pound for pound conversation. And as far as all that goes, I mean, there's a lot at stake here, right?
Well, there's a lot at stake here, but from my opinion, it's only a lot at stake more for the pound for pound. That's Khabib to maintain pound for pound. For Tony, I don't think it would put him a pound for pound. I think it would put him closer, definitely, if he happens to do what I think he's not going to do. But you never know, right? This is a fight game. My job is to not allow him to do it. and I do everything I can to prevent it, and that means talking positive about my guy, and that's what I want to do.
For sure.
So he's not going to be in the talk.
Yeah. And you've been around this game for a long time. Is this one of the most bizarre things you've seen? Like the fact that like this fight has been booked so many times and it hasn't come to fruition. Some people have even thrown the idea out there that the matchup is kind of cursed or something.
And yeah, this is the first for me. I've never had somebody, uh, supposed to fight 4 times and all of a sudden, the way it happened. Tony, especially the last one for Tony. Come on, man, everything was great. He tripped over a freaking wire.
Wire, yeah.
Come on, and then got that bad. Wow, and he ain't faking nothing.
Yeah.
That guy's a true warrior, man. He ain't faking nothing. So trust me, what happened was a freak accident, and yeah. So I can definitely see why people would think, is this fight cursed, never meant to be, and I can definitely see why people are, looking. Well, I want to be a backup to that fight because one of them's going to get hurt. Well, chances have shown that it's happened, right? It's not like one time; it's 4 times. So I'm thinking it's going to go through this time, and I want to believe it will go through, but it has gone through 4 times. So
yeah, for sure, and knock on wood there. And since this fight has been booked before, is it almost getting back, like picking up where you guys started, or like has the problems that you face as a coach going into like analyzing the challenge, has that changed at all, or is it the same things that you were preparing for before?
no, it's changed some because Tony's gotten better, Habib's gotten better. So it's not the same. Cannot be the same. Look how good Tony's looks. You can't say it's the same. No way. And look how good Habib's looks. Changed. Both of them are. We have to look at it like it's a brand new fight. We can't look, same old, same old. We know what we're looking into. No, different things have popped up since then from both sides.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of people are intrigued about this fight for obvious reasons. I mean, both guys are extremely skilled, and both guys have looked amazing in their past performances. I'm curious. Do you see what other people are saying? Do you think this might be Khabib's biggest challenge?
Yeah, it could very well be his biggest challenge. I know Khabib is respecting him like that, because he's not wanting to talk about anybody. Doesn't want to talk about his next title defense or anything because he feels he needs to give Tony all the respect that Tony deserves because, he needs to focus all on Tony. He don't want to talk about anybody else. I mean, I may say something because I get asked, but I try to stay away from talking about anybody else only because I want to stay in that arena like Khabib does. But I do mention other people, but not much.
Yeah, no, for sure, and I think that's totally fair. But I'm about to ask you about somebody else just because you mentioned something earlier in one of your answers. But this fight has fallen through a couple times. Conor has mentioned that, and he said, I'm willing to step in there on short notice if Tony Ferguson were to pull out due to injury or whatever. Are you guys open to that? Like, open to taking on a short notice fight against Conor? Because it seems Khabib is not interested in that, but in fighting Conor, period. But given the short notice circumstances, if it were to come down to that, knock on wood, would you guys be open to that or no?
I think that would be a Khabib question because he's the one that has to make that decision if that was to arise. And my thought process is to not think that way because I want to think it's going to be Tony and they're going to finally finish it. I've said this from the first interview I did right after he beat Conor. They asked what was next. I go, well, Tony. Tony deserves it. Tony needs to be next in line. And that was a while back. And then Tony didn't get it. Dustin got it, but it should have been Tony, in my opinion. Tony should have been the next one to get that fight. And he didn't get it. So, what you and I say, who deserves what, this and that, the UFC will say, well, we're giving you this guy. And you either take it or you don't, So, let's not be naive and think that we're in control. We're not in control. We can control what we do, but the organization controls who you fight or who you don't fight.
Mm-hmm. And Khabib is in Dagestan right now, right? He has yet to start training with you guys?
Yeah, he's on his way here.
Yeah, okay, cool. And how is he taking all this? Because, as I said, it's an interesting situation taking on a challenger that you guys have visited this many times before. Are you guys almost becoming like experts in facing Tony Ferguson because of the so many bookings?
Well, you can say they're experts in facing Khabib too. It's the same for both, right? I would say no. I don't think we're experts. Honestly speaking, we haven't fought him. And our theories are this or that will come to fruition that day. So we'll figure out if what we thought and what we worked on is correct or not. Because I would not call us experts because we haven't dominated the man yet. So once we get in that situation and what we worked on and what we've been doing works, maybe I'll say yes, our plan worked. The experts, I don't know.
Yeah. And where do you think a win would put Khabib? Because Tony's in a crazy win streak, and he's beaten pretty much all the other top contenders.
Yeah, they're both in crazy win streak. Habib's 12-0 too, if I'm not mistaken. This is the first time a 12-0 and 12-0 in the UFC are meeting, and they're rightfully so. Number one, champ. Number two, Tony. And so this is the first time you had two people on the rise like this face each other, and it's been built 4 fights previous for this, so this is bigger than ever. And all you got to do is look at the sales. I think they sold out, and now they're on the secondary market, and so now if you're want to buy a ticket for this event, you're not getting the original price, you're getting the marked up price, and otherwise you're not going to get into the event. You're not getting regular prices for this event. It's sold out. So the fans dictate that this is a great fight.
Yeah. And from a coaching standpoint, like what are the biggest challenges that Ferguson presents? Like what are some things that you guys analyzed and are working on to neutralize when you face him?
Well, he's got incredible cardio and really, really dangerous with the elbows. Extremely dangerous. The most dangerous lightweight in the history of the UFC with elbows. Unorthodox, is very effective unorthodox style. He's got a heart of a lion. You're not going to just break this guy. Not going to happen. He's not going to break Khabib. Khabib is going to break him. I don't see that happening. I see these guys beating each other to death before they break. They're not breaking. They're not breaking. Neither one of these guys are. So forget about that part. They're not breaking us. We're not breaking him. Now, beating him down, that's another story. He can beat us down and we can beat him down. My job is to have Khabib beat him down. So I have to be on that side because I can't be on the other side. So we're beating him down and we're doing everything we can to make sure that happens. And that means, acknowledging how dangerous these elbows are, acknowledging how dangerous his submissions are, acknowledging how dangerous he is with his cardio, acknowledging how dangerous he is, period.
Now, I talked to Enrique Barzola, who's training with you guys. He's from Peru. And he was talking about like how complex the Khabib system is of grabbing the wrists once the fight's on the ground and all the ties that he has. Obviously, we know that Ferguson, as you mentioned, he's got deadly elbows even from the bottom position. How much are you guys adjusting that, or how much do you think that'll be into play from controlling his arms in the bottom?
I think that a lot of that comes into play, controlling the arms, because, Tony's very dangerous. You can't let him roam free anywhere. You can't let him roam free in the stand-up either. You can't. You got to make him, you got to make him think about what's happening. You can't let him control what he's doing, because once he does, then that's when everything breaks bad for you. So you got to control whatever it is that he's going to attempt to do. And obviously, the game plan is to kill whatever the other person's trying to do. And, obviously we're not going to say that, right, or what it is and what we're going to work on. But the bottom line is we're working to kill anything that he's working on to kill us.
Yeah, for sure. And lastly, on the Tony Ferguson matchup, the media, Dana White and many other people have been talking about Conor McGregor, obviously, because he's back. He won recently against Donald Cerrone at UFC 246, if I'm not mistaken. How much do you guys work on just staying dialed in on the challenge that's ahead and not let other noise, media asking you about Conor, comments from Dana White saying that Conor, wants Khabib and all that, and even, Conor McGregor's fans as well?
Okay, it's very simple. 2 weeks ago, I called Khabib and I said, "Hey, Khabib, what do you think about what Dana's talking about Conor?" He goes, "Coach, let's not talk about that. I need to focus on Tony. Tony deserves my respect. I don't want to talk about him. We'll deal with that after, but I need to focus on Tony. I don't want to discuss anybody else because Tony deserves our respect. Don't you think?" And I said, "No, you're right. Tony deserves our respect. He is to be respected, and we need to focus on him. You're correct." So that pretty much sums up your answer.
Yeah.
I may talk about Conor or I may talk about GSP, but I really don't want to focus much on him because Khabib wants to focus on the real threat, and that's Tony.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I'm looking forward to that fight a lot. That is on April 18th in Brooklyn. That's going to be very exciting. Now, switching gears here, you mentioned that Daniel Cormier, you were just training with him, and you posted a video on Instagram. Is he back in sort of grind mode? Like, what's the latest with him? Because I know the UFC wanted that trilogy fight with Stipe, but it seems Stipe is injured, and he's also talked about having some interest in boxing. Where is Cormier at in all this? And I guess what's the latest on that?
Well, the UFC has, because Stipe has been injured, they'd offered Daniel a few other fights that Daniel declined because he wants Stipe. And he was offered the fight with the rematch with Stipe, and Daniel's willing to wait. And his mind and his thought is only on one person, rematch. That's what he wants. That's all he wants. Daniel's never refused anybody, as far as fighting, except this time around, because he wants only Stipe. Before, whoever the UFC offered him is who he'd take. Like when he was the champ, if the UFC offered him Stipe way back then, he would have taken Stipe instead of waiting for Brock like they promised. Because the winner of that fight was supposed to get Brock. That's why after Daniel beat Stipe, you notice Brock jumped into the cage. Well, that was all set up, So that was because they were supposed to fight. Then Brock, something happened, and he got pulled out for whatever reason. And then in between all that time, they gave Daniel, they wanted to know Daniel wanted to fight Derek Lewis. So Daniel said, okay, Stipe was, I got the call personally. They go, what do you think about Daniel and Derek Lewis? I go, like, when? They go, like, a month. And I went, what? I go, you know what? Let me see how Daniel looks and let me see how he feels. And so one practice sparring session, and we go, yeah, but Stipe was never in the talking about fighting him in 1 month, because if it was been Stipe, it would have been hell no, And the reason we took Derek, no disrespect to him, but he had no wrestling, and we figured Daniel go in there, use his wrestling, and look what happened. Exactly what we thought. You couldn't have done that to Stipe, so we would have declined that fight. So that would have been the first official decline we would have had Stipe been put on the platform, but he wasn't. It was Derek Lewis, and then so when the fight fell apart with Brock. Again, for whatever negotiation reasons, I don't know. I'm not behind the scenes on that. So it fell apart. Then the next person they offered was Stipe. So then DC said, he's always said, I'll fight him. And he's never declined anybody, except this time when they offered him two other people other than Stipe. And he said, no, I want my rematch with Stipe. They promised him that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Cormier has always been known for that. I mean, also another instance taking on Anderson Silva on short notice on a UFC 200, right, when John Jones had to pull out. So he's always down to fight anybody. And obviously that's the competitor in him. But he really wants that Stipe fight. That Stipe fight makes sense. Do you think, is there any scenario where you think he'll be like, get kind of tired of waiting and just wants to get back in there and take on somebody else? Or do you think he's set on waiting for the Stipe trilogy?
Set on Stipe, and then if you don't get Stipe, then that's probably it. So it'd be in the best interest of the UFC if they want to save, one marquee fight, which is a great trilogy, one of the trilogy fights that they've had, because they're both 1-1. So it's a great trilogy fight. So in the heavyweight division, I mean, I think the UFC is very smart, and I would believe, and I'm 100% thinking they're going to say, no, that's the fight to make.
Yeah, for sure. And is Cormier said like he was going to retire a while back, and he's fought past his retirement date. Do you think it'll be that one fight with Stipe and he's done, or do you think he'll continue fighting, because he still looks good? I mean, I thought that the first 2 rounds against Stipe in his last bout, some of the best rounds of his career.
Yeah, the first round was the best. The second round, he started going away from the plan. Third round, crazy Bob Cook and I are going, what the frick are you doing? And he just, fighters fight the way they fight. They don't always fight the way the coaches want them to fight, and sometimes they get that job done on their own. Sometimes they don't. Yeah. So as far as what your question, I think that's only a question for Daniel. I mean, I wanted him to retire before the Stipe fight. I thought he didn't need that fight, but now that fight's happened and he didn't come out on top. Now it's a different story. Now it's kind of like I'm leaving it up to him. In my mind, if you feel you want to fight, you're healthy. If you're healthy, go ahead, do it. So I don't think there's any retirement per se on his mind. But I know this: he won't fight anybody at the present time unless he gets Stipe.
Yeah. And What'd you make of his performance in his second time out with Stipe? Because I mean, as I said, those first couple rounds, especially that first one, he looked really good. But the result was in the end favorable for him.
Well, it's like, we all make excuses. We all say this, we all that, and I'm good at making excuses too, because I've done it. And the bottom line is, I like to tell the truth, that it does come out as an excuse. But, Daniel just did have surgery not too long after that fight. So he was not 100% going. He was good. He was ready for the title challenge, don't get me wrong. But he wasn't the same as he was the first fight, straight up. And I know it doesn't sound me good saying that, but I'll take the heat. That's fine. Lost away. I'm fine with that. It's the truth, though.
Yeah. Well, I mean, certainly things happen, so they're not, excuses, right? Things happen.
They won fair.
Yeah, for sure.
He
Yeah,
hit
that's true.
Full body shot. He recovered. He was losing all the rounds. He recovered fantastic. And I mean, hey man, if I got to say anything, man, props off to him. He came back from adversity and he pulled it off. So man, there's a lot to be said for how he did. Only a true champion can do that. A champion of champions, they do that, and he did that. So they're both in the same category. They're both champions of champions, and they're both pulled it off, and they're both proven it. So a trilogy fight would be a great one between two great champions.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, hoping the UFC books that one. Is certainly unsettled business. It makes sense, and the first two fights were great. They were exciting. So looking forward to that. Lastly, I'm just curious on this. A lot was made about his move up to heavyweight and how good Daniel Cormier has looked at heavyweight, and kind of people forget about his Strikeforce days. Mostly remember him from his light heavyweight days in the UFC. But what's the biggest difference between Daniel from light heavyweight to heavyweight? And do you buy or do you agree with the idea that he's a better heavyweight fighter than a light heavyweight fighter?
Oh, 100% he's a lot better at the heavyweight. Shows it in the gym all the time. When he doesn't have to worry about weight and just get in condition and fight, he's way better. We've always. But, the reason why he did it is because of Cain Velasquez, because he knew he was on a collision course for Cain, and rather than fight his brother, who he considers his brother, and he proved it. He dropped at a compromising weight that he was not at his best, just so he wouldn't ever have to fight his brother. And that's why that happened. The only reason why he went up to heavyweight is it was offered, and he asked for Cain's permission before he took that fight. His wife and Cain were the two people he asked if he could take that fight with, where he won the title, and they said yes, and that's why he took that fight with Stipe in the first place, because Cain and his wife.
Yeah, and it's super impressive what you say, and he still managed to become champion and achieve a lot at 205 pounds. So that just speaks volumes to his skill set and determination. Lastly, before we end this interview, I want to ask you, any fighters at AK that we should be watching out for? I know there's a lot of young killers out there, but maybe someone that's been floating under the radar that we might not know of that is on the come up.
Yeah, there's so many. There's so many. There's Ed Ruth that's fighting next week. There's Salim, where I can't even never pronounce his last name. He's fighting in the same card. There's Deron Wynn. I mean, Romero Cotton. It's just, Kyle Crutchmere. I mean, I have so many, and then Habib's got a whole crew, Umar, his cousin, who's fighting with him, and Usman, who's Habib's other cousin, who I predict is going to be the next UFC champion. Umar, I believe, will be the 135 champion. You wait till you see him. And Usman, his brother. Oh, man, those guys are incredible. There's a lot of guys from Dagestan that are with me, with Khabib, that are going to be well known. And in Islam, of course, you've seen how good he is. And Islam's having a hell of a time getting opponents because nobody wants to fight him.
Right. Yeah, that must be tough for him. And I don't know why, because Kevin Lee wanted to fight him. I don't know why that got booked. They gave him Charles Oliveira.
Well, the UFC is the one that's avoiding that one. I think they're trying to wait for those guys at a bigger stage. But at the present time, the guys that are higher level or that are available are not wanting to go bat up with Islam. And you know what? To be honest with you, I probably don't blame them. And then the other ones that they would fight him, either conflict or injury or whatever. So, but it's tough right now. I was told from his manager that they're trying to get him matched, but they're having a tough time with him. Because where do you put him? He's that good. Do you risk it for him because he's not as ranked as he should be. He should be ranked in the top 10 or under by far, but he's not. So what do you do with him? He's that dangerous. I personally, if I had to fight him, I'd probably say wait him to get a bigger name, and then we'll fight him.
Yeah, yeah. And is he in San Jose, or is he in?
He'll be here tomorrow.
Ah, okay, yeah, yeah. And I'm guessing he's ready to go because I know he's been itching for a fight for a bit.
Yeah, he's ready to go,
Yeah.
and just UFC needs to figure out where and when, and he's ready to go. He's 100% ready to go. He is a talent, man. That guy is a talent. He's a beast.
And I know you're gonna start training camp pretty soon with Khabib. But any Instagram adventures you got planned for the future, the recent future?
No, well, actually, I'm starting AKA Javier Mendez podcast. I just started it.
Nice.
And it's just kind of like wacky, not like real, like, I don't know. It's kind of like different, I'm just being myself, and we're just gonna talk. There isn't like really anything in particular, just talk. I don't know, different ideas, A friend of mine that's working out is the one who's getting me do it. They're trying to get me to do it forever. I keep saying no, I don't want to do it. And so I finally got, okay, fine, I'll do a little bit here and there. But, we're working on a podcast. And we had AKA Fight News podcast, but we deleted that completely. So the almost 18,000 subscribers we had are gone. So now we're at maybe 50 now.
Yeah. All right. Well, with with the names that you got in your gym, I'm sure it'll be quick to get back up to that number.
It'll back up, and it was like at 18,000. I go, hey, man, what the hell? It took a little bit to get that, 4 months at least. Now I got to start from scratch. It's okay. I mean, it's more for fun anyway.
Yeah, well, looking forward to that because, your Instagram, as I said, shout out to your Instagram because it's one of the best Instagrams in MMA. Oh, super funny moments. Also, you learn a lot from, your fighters on a personal level. You're there on the scenes and filming them. So it's very nice. All right, Javier, well, I appreciate you joining me in this interview. Best of luck on April 18th with Khabib Nurmagomedov. And again, I appreciate you taking time out of your day to do this interview.
Don't forget his cousin. His cousin's on that card, too.
That's right, yeah.
Umar, and then they're trying to get Islam, so hopefully I get all three. That'd be nice.
I'll keep a close eye now that you mentioned. I was going to keep an eye anyways, but we'll keep an even closer eye on that bout with Omar for sure. All right, thank you, Javier. Appreciate it.
Thanks, man. All right, bye-bye.